Thank you much, everybody, for joining us today for webinar number 2 of Quantum PM's Art of the Possible webinar series. Today's webinar is going to focus on using the best practice usage of Project Online and Power BI, Microsoft PPM productivity tools. When we talk about best practices, what that means is really using the capabilities of this technology to power an enterprise PPM capability. Enterprises like to stand up, best-in-class PPM, and having a technology layer to support that overall process. Microsoft Project Online and Power BI serve as excellent foundations for that. We're also going to focus on the how. Specifically, it's really nice to be able to do these things, but what's the best way for rolling this out in a way that drives adoption and is something that's not so overwhelming to an organization that they can't digest it. This is, as I'm saying, this is webinar number 2 for the Project Online piece of this. Other webinars we're going to have include the one on Tuesday, September 25th, focused on integration, using an integration hub, how we would link systems together to build enterprise PPM and enterprise integration across a company so technology can be leveraged to drive business strategy. I'm a better off or worse than last month, which is around snapshots and trend analysis. Getting more value out of Project Online and Power BI. That's more making sure that you're optimizing the usage of your licenses. The key challenge there is, companies subscribe to Microsoft licenses and they don't have, they're not taking maximum value of their investment. So this is intended to remediate that. And finally, it's going to talk about automation, which is really, building process discipline and building controls into your PPM solution so that the user can fix their own problems themselves rather than relying on someone else to fix it. So, it should be a good series, and it's going to focus again on the what and the how. What's the best way to deploy it? Quantum PM is spent a lot of time developing webinars focused on best practices. If you go to quantumpm.com/webinars, there's a series of on-demand webinars that are available. Ones that focus on PPM best practices. Here are some other ones that are focused on healthcare and some that are focused on finance. So if there are subjects of interest, feel free to join us and log on and use the replay. About Quantum PM, we are a Gold Microsoft partner. Being a Gold Microsoft partner, we are Gold certified in cloud productivity, PPM, application development, Silver in collaboration and content, and Silver in small market and cloud solutions. We're very good at PPM and SharePoint integration. We're working with Microsoft Teams and Planner as well. So that element of the Office 365 stack we focus on. Integration using our BI Advantage tool. Quantum PM has a Azure-based integration hub. We call it BI Advantage. That's used to pull data from lots of different systems based on the ability of their APIs to deliver it, manipulate the data, aggregate the data, do snapshots and trend analysis, but also uses basically a traffic cop that moves data across different systems to support best-in-class enterprise architectures. Basically, in terms of industry experience, we've worked across many segments of industries, and we've been in business since year 2000. So, we can definitely deliver best practice solutions that can support an entire enterprise. Our expertise within PPM, pretty much the entire gamut of the disciplines, PPM, resource, demand lifecycle, workflow to support stage gating and approval processes, BI, tactical business intelligence, which is Power BI, and dashboarding, integration, which could support cross applications like we talked about before, between different applications, add-ons for desktops and online services, which is around putting controls on pieces of functionality to enforce discipline. So for example, if somebody can only enter, plus or minus 10% on the percentage of completion. So for example, if they can only increase or decrement it by more than 10% or less than 10%, they put 20% in, there's going to be something that'll prevent them from doing it. And also migrations, from different versions of Microsoft technology and non-Microsoft technology, and just move your current state to the future state. Let's talk about Project Online capabilities. If you look on the right, this is a PMI survey, and it talks about the opportunity for excellence in terms of PPM. One of the challenges a lot of companies have is from do the right projects on the x-axis. It's really focused there on, there's most companies are doing 62% of them. The projects meet their goals and expectations, but there's a series that aren't. So there could be improvements from the execution perspective. And then on the y-axis, you've got the situation where are we working on the right stuff, which is do the right projects. So what the result there is that you find yourself investing in projects that are not necessarily aligned with the strategy of the overall organization. And there's a significant increase there. So, the ability to manage a portfolio, optimize the portfolio to gain the greatest ROI on your scarce resources and limited ability to spend or otherwise. I mean, there's significant opportunity for improvement there. For project management, the same thing. I mean, you can manage the project, have the controls in place, build the Power BI reports. So there's a significant opportunity for organizations there. Project inline capabilities, you got the demand management, enterprise resource management. Those are very important capabilities. Basically managing resources, not just within Project Online, but if you integrate with other systems, you can actually manage resources universally across an enterprise. Project management, you can focus on, best practice, waterfall, agile, continuous build. It's really to think of it as more along the lines of work management. It's where work is managed irrespective of how it's actually being managed from an execution perspective. Project sites through SharePoint, ideation and intake processing, where you've got such, companies are focusing on the innovation and trying to generate ideas from their staff. I mean, this will allow you to do that. Workflow and gating, supporting business processes using workflow and gating processes. Integration with third-party systems, that we talked about that. Integrating with Power BI and reporting. Those are really important anyway, because, I mean, what that does is it provides you, Power BI is, can sit on top of your Project Online and Microsoft Stack and really give you the ability to, it gives you the overall ability to gain insights into the overall effectiveness of your program. And then the integration with the Office 365 product suite, all those elements of Microsoft Project are being pulled together. In terms of the benefits associated with it, you've got the Project Online benefits. Microsoft did a Forrester study back in March of 2018. The study was very effective in terms of identifying what the ROI can be on an investment associated with it. ROI of 387% in many cases was what was achieved. But I mean, some of the efficiencies were, time savings for project managers, about 60%. You've got productivity and visibility improved, left to increase in resource effectiveness. I mean, an example of that could be situations where, people are working on the right stuff and the utilization is much higher. Integration is a big source of the value that's going on. Cloud-based solution, reduce infrastructure costs and scalability. And then in terms of maturity in the PPM, the ability to manage projects, I mean, that's a big element of the overall value proposition of Project Online. Why to use cloud solutions? I mean, a big example here is it's scalable. It supports enterprise growth. You just have to buy licenses and it completely scales. Low cost of entry. There's really no CapEx expense. It's really, let's just subscribe and get on Office 365 for Active Directory for security purposes. Integration with O365. I mean, there's a periodic table here that shows some of the other applications within the, they call it the waffle at Microsoft. Ease of use and adoption. It's very simple to do. Microsoft innovation, new capabilities being developed regularly, technology standardization, infrastructure simplification, and security. Microsoft spends about $1 billion a year on security. So it's integration, the ability to talk within O365 and other applications is core to the ability of the tool to drive value. Okay, let's talk about best practices. I mean, some of the common pain points that that companies have include, as I call them, the big three. I mean, the big three that we have really focus on portfolio management. Is one of the big three pain points that organizations have. A lot of times, being able to look at the domain of all the projects being worked on, scoring them in a consistent and uniform manner, and really allow you to mathematically prescribe a particular value associated with an investment. So, I mean, here on the right here, there's some examples of how do we define value for projects in a portfolio, like new revenue, revenue at risk, cost savings, cost avoidance, regulation, percentage of business value, percent of efficiency. I mean, the key thing to think about there for portfolio management is it's based upon aligning the value metrics for the projects in the portfolio with the value proposition of the organization in general. I mean, the more value of the project that it prescribes, the more value is being delivered and alignment with the objectives of the business, I mean, that allows you to optimize the portfolio you're working on and the ROI being derived from the investment. Resource management, that's another best practice. I mean, one of the, as I call it, the undefined time problem. I mean, one of the challenges you see frequently when you are, as a consultant like I am, is that most companies don't have very good visibility into what their employees are working on. This whole undefined time problem is, what element of percentage of time do people have that we really don't have a good accounting for? And what we can do here is, a resource management perspective is, we want to build a stack that allows us to count for 100% of the time. And if there's this undefined part, what you do is set up a program that says, okay, we're going to define this 30% as, quote, unrealized or unrecognized time, and then reduce it down and say within 6 months we'll get it down from 30% to 20% to 10%. So it becomes sequential in that respect, in that way. Other aspect of resource management is the whole what if resource planning. I mean, there's a capability here where we can say, okay, let's change the dates and what happens to our ability to deliver if we change start dates. What happens if we add resources to the mix? I mean, what happens in terms of our ability to deliver against this value proposition? I mean, the idea is if you're paying resources, they're relatively, it depends on how it is. It could be a variable cost for some resources, a fixed cost for others. Making sure that we maximize the output and utility of these particular projects, and in fact, the amount of work that they're able to do over a period of time. Another pain point you see all the time is reporting. The problem you see a lot of times is companies don't have a good way of aggregating data. They usually do it manually. A lot of manual manipulation of data. It winds up being in a situation where it's either wrong or taking half the time to actually deliver it. So it becomes very, problematic on how to do this. So for reporting and dashboards, what the best solution here is using, Power BI to do this. But, best practices is, let's understand the audience and tailor it accordingly, i.e. don't overclutter it. Make sure the reports and dashboards are targeted toward the specific user group. Align it with KPIs and value drivers. You want to make sure that how you're valuing your portfolio on the left is aligned with the reports. And it depends on the audience, certainly. I mean, for the CIO, he cares about the value, or she cares about the value side of this. But if you're the project manager, you're more concerned with the delivery side of it. Ownership of reports is aligned with the PMO, so that we understand who the target is for specific reports, and the reports are constructed accordingly. If you go to dashboards here, I mean, the way Power BI works is that if there's this concept of reports and dashboards. A report is delivered from a single source of data. It has one data set. It can come from Excel. It can come from Project Online. It can come from SharePoint. It can come from, if you're using BI Advantage as an integration hub, it can come from SAP. It can come from Oracle. It can come from Salesforce. It can come from Dynamics. It doesn't matter. And you can generate reports that sit on top of these things that provide insights into the single source of data. And then you can construct a thing called a dashboard, which is a mashup of all these reports. So it pulls different elements of these reports and puts them in a display. And the advantage of doing that is you can build a dashboard that's like, here's the CIO's executive dashboard. Here is the portfolio manager's dashboard. Here's the resource manager's dashboard, where you get all these different inputs. This is also useful if you've got like a decentralized sources of data. You can use BIA to pull it together, but even if it's still more decentralized, you can, if it's decentralized, use BIA to pull it together into one stack and then put it onto, one Power BI report. In terms of the capabilities of Project Online and the PMO, I mean, the thing to think about is that Project Online and Power BI, and especially these can support all the core capabilities of a PMO. I mean, a lot of times you've got demand coming down from the businesses. You got a supply, which is your ability to deliver against that particular lines of demand, and really achieving a handshake where supply equals demand is a primary goal of every type of organization. Otherwise, you wind up with somebody is disappointed or unsatisfied with the performance of the other. I mean, frequently, like in the IT example, you see IT has done a bad job, they haven't delivered. The reason for that is because in many cases, they're overcommitted. So organizationally, you can set up a business relationship manager who achieves his handshake, but the Project Online and Power BI stack can be used to manage the portfolios as they flow in. It can be used for project management in terms of managing the work. Let's call it work management, because it could be agile, could be waterfall, it could be continuous development, could be integrated with planners. So this could be called work management. Dashboards and reporting could be used to provide enterprise reporting around the ecosystem. And then you could have enterprise resource management, which can come from Project Online and other sources. And then you've got demand, which portfolio management, which can be used to manage all the work that's being considered both in flight and candidate projects, which will allow you to score it. So it's a comprehensive solution that supports a PMO. Okay, now that we've talked about what the best practices are from a solutioning perspective, let's talk about how do we implement this. And really, what you're trying to do as an organization when you're implementing, you want to try to make sure that it's low risk, the level of change is digestible by an organization, and it achieves adoption. You want to make sure the organization can actually use the tools. And the reason this is so important is if you roll out a huge, here's a technology PMO solution, if you don't have the governance and the processes around it, it's going to fail. Right? It can't just be a technology development. So it's got to have the governance and the process and the SOPs and the KPIs. All that needs to be defined. And the thing is, it takes time to get there. So it's not like you've got it all day one and then let's implement. It's usually good from a drive adoption and change management perspective is really to do it like essentially an agile based approach where you do it sequentially over time. And the theme and the speed is basically driven by the ability of the organization to adopt and the ability to bring processes and people, process, technology together around these things. The other thing to think about is the way the tool is constructed or Project Online is constructed. Best implements by project manager, resource manager, portfolio manager. So there is in fact a definitive best practice in terms of how to actually implement this. When you're doing sprints, you can do it from pain point remediation and strategic prioritization. So those are good areas to start in. So frequently people start with project management and define the work, and then think about resourcing, and then think about portfolio. But the other thing is this last step, the ability to use backlogs and retrospectives. I mean, it's important that you're always looking backwards at subsequent. When you're looking at adding functionality, you're also looking back where you can make changes to existing functionality. I mean, one of the approaches we like to use, and I like to use quite a bit with many companies, which has achieved a lot of success, is this whole idea of a multi-step release. And really the way to think about it is, this is kind of a foundational capability, and this is more of an enhancement capability. So what you can do is in the first part, step one focuses on scoping, which is really figuring out what you're going to build, what your roadmap would look like, what the training should look like that's required to support that. But this is more, build a backlog. Let's figure out what we want to do, what the sequencing is going to be on this. And the best way to do that is do like what we're doing here is an art of the possible review, which is really a deep dive walkthrough of the tool, understand what this thing can do, and then use that along with whatever work you're doing from a process and governance perspective as a mechanism for determining what sequence you're going to be implementing this. So that's the output that comes out of this, and then you've period of adoption where there's socialization of the output here, and then the ability to utilize that and think about ways of going forward with it. Step two is what I call optimization or initial capability. This is more along the lines of let's just get in here and establish some initial baseline capability. This is usually Project Online type stuff. Maybe some project management work. There'll be training associated with it, some reporting that would be associated with it. This would be very much aligned with pain points and ability of the organization to accept change. And then you start from there, and then focus on an adoption period, and then you'd have releases after that or sprints after that, where you'd want to do a retrospective that looks back at the current baseline. You'd have fixes to the process from the retrospective, and you'd have updates associated with it. Training and reporting that would go with it. So this would be something that would go over time. And the thing you could do is from an organization perspective, from an implementation is, if you're going to use a third party like us, a consulting firm that does this, we kind of focus on this stuff. And in terms of going into the refinement phase, you can do support type arrangements to enable this, and then organizations can build the capability themselves. So it really gives you an opportunity not just to establish a capability, but also to gain ability to support the tool and processes yourself. So this works very well. Instead of having phase one, phase two, phase three, which is old school, waterfall. Here's another opportunity from a best practice is what I call a system of record architecture. We talked about BI Advantage. It's an Azure-based hub. It allows you to take data from lots of different systems, aggregate it in a Azure database and SQL database in Azure, You can do snapshots, you can do trend analysis, you can do Power BI reporting against it. You can take the data from here, send it to there, and then it's all driven by business rules, meaning depending upon how all these systems are designed to talk to each other, those business rules would be used to actually configure connectors that we offer that are associated with BI Advantage. So for example, I'd want to understand like ITSM, how am I doing incidents? Okay, if I create an incident, then I would want to go ahead and create work associated with it. If that's the type of output, it might be routed to a call center. Okay, that could be a possibility. And that's what I mean by business rules, is figuring out what the rules are for triaging activity and then configuring the BIA connector, which supports IT service management, as a mechanism for passing things back and forth. Here's an example of one through SAP, which is an ERP package, which is financial management. You might have a situation where every time a project's created, there could be an approval process here, then budget's allocated, and that needs to be tracked. So the approval needs to be sent from Project Online to SAP to set up a general ledger account for this particular expense and keep the CapEx and OpEx piece of it. And you can track CapEx and OpEx within Project Online. But what it allows you to do, though, is you got to think about how do you do your work within this entire architecture. And when I say system of record, one of the absolute best practices is don't try to make a system do something it's not designed to do. And you should take advantage of the core capabilities of these systems and use them to the best degree possible. So for example, if I want to do if I want to do financial management, I'm going to use SAP. Don't try to do Project Online to do financial management. You've got financial management tools that do that. If I want to do incidents, I'm not going to use Project Online to do incidents. I'm going to use an ITSM tool to do incidents. Same for something like Aptio for IT for financial management. I'm not going to try to do that. I'm going to let an ITFM tool do that. If I'm going to do ITFS for code promotion or agile, I'm not going to try to do that within Project Online. I'm going to use the capabilities within TFS. So that's what I mean by understanding your architecture and allowing it to do what it does best, and then using BIA to in effect paint this mosaic. So that, and it's not a smorgasbord of point to points. It's actually everything hangs together, and we can, and since it's one hub, it's how everything hangs together and allows you to create this whole enterprise architecture. And then we talked about this whole idea earlier of phasing this thing. This is a classic example of something where agile development, where infinite number of phases and ability to adopt work really well. You might just want to bring in ITSM, low complexity integration for the first. For this sprint, and then 2 or 3 sprints, you might say, well, I'm going to add a little more complexity to it. I might want to have situations where instead of just bringing the sprint start end date and the status, I might decide subsequently, oh, by the way, I also want to bring content of the sprint. What are the stories that are included in it, if you wanted to make that choice? So you have that capability to do that. Here's some other possible integrations. The work management, Asana, Planner, ERP, Oracle, SAP, Lawson, some of the big ones, Epic for healthcare, ServiceNow for ITSM, dashboards, Power BI, or we can do Tableau too. Office 365, SharePoint, Office 365, and CRM, you can use Dynamics or Salesforce. Co-promotion, TFS, VSTS, you can do that. Visual Studios, CA Rally, Maven, Jenkins, all the others. So this is very robust, and there's a lot of possibilities here in terms of how you can get the organization to hang together. Okay, let's do our demo. We're going to talk about best practices in Project Online. Let's switch over to that right now. Okay, what I'm looking at now is in Project Online. It's called the Project Center, highest level view of Project Online. What this would be is the enterprise portfolio view. You would see this is the portfolio of projects where you'd have, and the way this is broken out is you've got it by project type. So each project type would represent a specific type of project being done that would be managed by Project Online. They would have different attributes that would be associated with that project type, and you could have visibility into the entire portfolio of projects or a segment of the portfolio of projects. And then up here is the timeline, which can be key fields that are associated, or key tasks or projects associated to it that are brought up top. Other ones you could have would be other attributes within Project Center would be would be things like this would be views. Okay, there's a couple things here. The first thing is the view concept. And what this does is allows you to have and look at a subcomponent of the portfolio. So if I want to just look at it by, let's look at portfolio by project type. I mean, this would be the broadest view of everything that's being managed by Project Online. And the thing you'll see here, for example, is you're managing lots of different projects that are interrelated. I've got M&A work here. I've got IT project waterfall. I've got these, which are QPM, back office, corporate functions, customer experience, end-to-end. These are all IT. These are all transformation, business transformation project types. I've got Scrum project where I've got agile stuff. So, it can be very overwhelming. And what this shows you is lots of different groups can use this tool. Frequently, we roll it out with one group initially, and then it goes to another group. I mean, I'm talking to one customer right now who's talking about implementing it for a transformation program, but the IT group is sniffing around and might want to come in later. The other one, I've done another one where we rolled it out for IT, and then, by the way, we've got marketing that's coming in. Then we've got business process new product development coming in later. So that's the whole scalability thing. But if you use views, you can say, well, I just want to look at my segment of the portfolio. So let's look at what I'm calling QPM portfolio workflow. What this is, it's going to just let me look at the 4 project types that are associated with transformation that I was talking about. These fields can all be configured along here. These are the 4 project types that I want to look at per the constraints of my view. Let's look at what we have here. So if we go in, what I've got is for this project type, QPM back office integration, I've got workflow associated with it. So I know there's a stage gate process that's going as we progress through these things. I've got a series of projects with different ROIs and traffic lights that are flowing on here. So I mean, this is one example of the type of information that I can capture. One way to create projects, of course, is to do new. So I can just go new, and you'll notice these are the 4 project types that I have for purposes of the demo. So today what we're going to do, let's look at one, I don't know, what do we want to create here? Let's do end-to-end process. Let's create one called QPM end-to-end process. So I'm creating a brand new process. I'm going to call this AOP, Art of the Possible Webinar to Demo. I'll make me the owner. Okay, that. Finish it up. Spool it up. Okay, so I've created a brand new project here for this project type for the project type. So what this shows me, if you look at it, there's a couple things to look at here. I've got AOP Webinar 2 Demo. That's the project name. On the left here, what you've got is project detail pages, and these are all configurable. These are attribute specific. You can have 5 of these, 4 of these, 2 of these, however you want these aligned with the project type that we're using. You'll notice here we've got workflow. So we've defined steps that are associated with it. So these have all got gating associated with it. You also notice on this top screen that we have sections to be completed. So if I want to get to the next stage from this, the way it works is it's phases and stages. So, initiation phase encompasses these 2 stages. So if I want to get from this stage to that stage, these are the things I have to do. You've also got a workflow stages narrative at the bottom here that allows you to look at where we are in terms of the flow, where are we in process, what's the entry date, completion date. It gives you all that kind of information there. Other data points that we've got the project information that we can look at. All of this is configurable that are user specific. Project details, which talk about information that are associated with a particular project. A lot of this can flow from ideation. So if you use an ideation process where, let's go back to the picture here, where I've got a project proposal that hasn't come into the portfolio yet, I can create a within SharePoint. A lot of times this is done, or you can use SAP Fiori. All the data elements that you can prescribe within the product proposal, push across, and they can come into this particular area. So this is all entirely configurable in terms of the project details. Project schedule. the project schedule is very useful because this is a default structure that's been used and associated with this particular project type. And what it captures is standard processes that you want to use for this project type, standard durations. It gives you default resource categories that can be assigned to these things, puts it into the taskbar. Advantage of this, of course, is that everybody does things the same way. The standard durations can be reflective of best practices and those things that are identified over time. And this is all things that we can use to achieve standardization. Plus, from a reporting perspective, with everything done the same ways, you have the option here of getting consistency in terms of benchmarking and identification of pain points in the process. Strategic impact. The strategic impact can be associated with, these are the elements of value that are associated with a particular project. So, for example, and portfolio. This drives the portfolio management capability within Project Online. So, what you've got here is 6 different drivers of value. These are the scoring that's being used to associate it with this. So, for example, if it expanded to new markets as a driver of strategic value, you might have 6 different scores associated with it. What this does is when you look at the portfolio, you've got consistent benchmarks that are being used consistently across the project. In terms of the validation of these and what the values are, these can evolve over time. So if you've got a situation where you don't know all the values initially, you can update these and improve these as you go. So this is these are some of the attributes of this project type, and like I was saying, it's all configurable. And you can also have a project site, which what this does is it's basically a SharePoint site that allows you to say, okay, let's have a place that we can store documents and timelines against, for a particular project. So, what it comes down to is that, you've got these documents that are associated with this project, and it gives you one repository for document management. Another thing you can do here is you've got issues and risks that are associated with the project. I like to configure like change request in there so there's a consistent view. So basically all the project management documentation can fit in here. So this is all pretty important from an operational perspective. Let's go back to projects here. If we go back to the key topic here, so if we've got the projects here that we created, I'm going to go back to my portfolio. The one I just created here was all the way at the bottom, customer experience. I called it AOP. Here we go. Oh, I didn't complete this one yet. AOP Webinar 2. Oh, maybe I did. And here it is, AOP Webinar Demo. Let's go back into this project here. So once I've got all these different elements, I have the option here of pushing this into completion. So if I go here and submit the workflow, hit processing, workflow and process. Give it a second to refresh. Sorry about that, hit mute by accident. But yeah, so if you give it a second to refresh and we go like this, refresh the screen. Push it across to the next phase. So, this workflow is pretty capable. You can have routing associated with it in terms of who actually does the approval. So this is pretty important. So let's go back to project portfolio. You'll notice this is parked to complete. So some of the other best practices that are available here would include portfolio management. Let's look at portfolio management here. Let's one more thing we're going to cover here. So one of the things Project Online does, which is really well, is it has a thing called Click to Run. Click to Run really allows you, there's 2 versions with Project Online. You get the PWA, which is Project Web Access, which is the web version of an overall project. And then you've got the Click to Run version of it, which is the local application that runs on your machine. And what it does is it's all integrated. So if I want to click on this, I have the option of bringing my project down to my local desktop and actually doing the manipulation there. And so what we're going to do here is we'll bring it down to the local desktop. So I can bring it down. You can take a look at it from here. And what this does is you can add columns to it. There's different elements associated with it that can be used to, based on this, you can go ahead and add elements to it. You can add resources to it. Let's go. These are some of the standard ones. If I want to go up here to resource management, I can go to add management. I can go over here to build team from enterprise and decide which resources could potentially be assigned to this. One of the things you can do here is show resource availability. So if you want to just get an idea of who's available, here's the duration based on your project, apply it. And then pick your resources. So for example, in this case, I'll pick CC Consultant, which I would call a default and generic resource. I'll pick one called, let's pick me. Then you'd have the ones that are so what this does, it gives you increase the domain of resources who can be assigned to a task, so we can increase the utilization, so we get to resource management. And then you can take this and then based on the assignments, you can use this as an input to resource management. The way this works is then when you would finish, you would go ahead and publish it and hit the save, and then you can publish the task up to back up to PWA. Yeah, I wonder why that's read only. It's okay though. So now that we've got that defined, it will come back up to this piece here. So let's go look at, actually I gotta push this back in. Let me check it back in. Let's close this project, check it in. That's why I couldn't open it on the desktop version, because I had to check it in. So purposes of, so what this does is then we've allocated resources to this. Best practice from a resource management perspective, let's look at this too. What this does, it lets you look at, when you get to Resource Center and Resource Management, you have the opportunity of looking at the domain of resources that are out there. You can configure this, that you can put like a team indicator in here, so you can only look at some element of it. The idea being is that you've got a combination of real resources that are people. You might have what we call generic resources, which are very useful because, a lot of times if you're the project manager, you don't know who to assign to a project. So you just have somebody pick a generic and have somebody assign it for you. So what this does, I've selected a combination of these are test name user IDs that we have, me and a generic resource for purposes of today's demo. If we go to resource management, this is the overall, what they call the ribbon. So if you go here, you can click down and these are different types of resources. You might have work resources, cost resources, material resources. And then you go here to capacity planning. Let's go look at capacity planning. And what this does, it gives you insights into what's available. Some examples here. When the key thing here is the views. It gives you the look at the resource data. So if I click on this, resource utilization, utilization by project, remaining availability, and work by resource. These are the ones that come as a result of the standard configuration within Project Online, or these are come with the system. You look at resource utilization. This gives you some pretty good views. So for the selected resources that I have here, what this shows me is what is being utilized, how many hours have been, the capacity. What this shows you is the yellow line is the capacity that's available for these resources. This is how much been assigned. You'll see how much of what the percentage of what the total number of hours are that are associated with it. And you'll see you've got some that are underutilized, the 40-hour ones, and then you get these other ones which are wildly overallocated. So if you scroll down here, you'll see, like CC Consultant in the month of October, the capacity is 184 hours, availability is negative 336, total hours is 520. So this person is wildly over allocated. So what this tells you, you need to get some work off of this generic resource and reassign it to your team. You want to find someone else to do it. This person, me, I'm available at negative 104, so I'm already over allocated. These are the projects I'm working on. But CIE 1007 isn't doing anything. They have 184 hours available. Capacity is 184, so they're fully available to support support activities and projects that are going on. Some other useful views here could be ones like remaining availability. And what this tells you is, what the availability is. So what this says here, this allows you gives you really good insights into, who's over allocated, who's under allocated. And what this tells me is that, I need to have some of my work transition to one of these folks. And the resource manager can do that type of work. So this is a really useful view, and this can, by reallocating work across some different groups, and it gives you can actually, if you want to see what they're doing, you can look at like resource assignments. So based on these folks, if you want to get a deep dive into the information and the work they're specifically doing, here's the projects they're working on. These are the tasks they're assigned to. These are the hours. So you can actually get the granularity you need to make decisions about resourcing. The thing you'll notice is when you set these things up from a best practice perspective is, make sure you capture all the individual time that's associated with it. Okay, let's talk about, I know we're going quick, but we don't have a lot of time for this 1 hour demo. One other thing I want to say is that, each one of these topics is like an hour in itself. So if you need to have a deep dive, please talk to Lori Dawkins at Quantum, and she'll be happy to help you arrange a full scale demo on specific areas. Another key aspect, capability, and best practice of this tool set is the whole strategic alignment piece, strategy piece of this, which is the portfolio management. If you look at the key things that are available, you got the driver library, driver prioritization, and the portfolio analysis. The drivers, you'll see these are the ones that we scored on the projects when we considered bringing them into the overall portfolio. The ranges that are available in terms of high, medium, and low, all of those things can be configured. They can also evolve over time as you gain institutional knowledge. So for example, none, low, moderate, strong, extreme. You can define those definitions as you go. And this is good because, again, like continuous improvement, it's a big theme here as you gain maturity of it. In terms of driver prioritization, what this lets you do is develop different schemas. So for example, remember we talked about there was a whole different slew of enterprise project types that are being used by this tool. They probably have different groups. So if I have an HR group looking at things, if I have executives looking at things, if I have a CIO looking at things, by definition, they would have different prioritizations. And the way the model can work is it doesn't look at the whole portfolio of projects. It looks at a segment of it. So the CIO can look at just the CIO projects and use their own schema for it. Okay, portfolio analysis. This is the mathematical side of this, and what this does is it allows you to compute and actually do the prioritization and come up with a numeric value for it. And what it does is it looks at the scoring of the projects, looks at the weighting schema that was defined that we looked at in the driver prioritization, and then applies it to calculate, gives you basically a number associated with the project. So let's look at this one, 2015, 2018 portfolio analysis. Here's a model I've built. This is the driver prioritization schema I'm using, what the constraint is that's using with it. So I've got this particular model. So let's look at the attributes here. Let's look at the prioritization of the projects based on this schema, using that prioritization group. We're only looking at 12 projects for purposes of this demo, but and we configured it that way. It wasn't just we fixed it. We actually said 12, but these are the value drivers along the x-axis. The y-axis has got the projects themselves. You'll see this is a heat map that shows you the relationship between the projects and the value that's being delivered. Kind of useful for can be kind of useful for trying to convey the value of the portfolio. And then you get the review priority side of this, which is really about let's look at the overall calculation of what the projects are from a value perspective. So what the tool does is if you aggregate all this, it's 100 is what this comes out to. and it says based on the scoring of the project and the schema that I'm using, so there's nonlinear scoring. Remember we talked about, some of these based on like the CIO prioritization. Some of the drivers might have more weight than others. This is the numeric value that's associated with it. And then if we want to figure out what the value is, there's really two towers here. You got the analyze cost side of it and the analyze resource side of it. Analyze cost. What this does is it says based on purely on dollars, what's the best investment that you can make from a project perspective? And it can look at both candidate projects and projects that you currently have in your portfolio, which from best practice is important because you want to make sure that you're not just confirming that, whether we should bring something to the portfolio, you also want to look at is, should something stay there? A lot of times, they don't want to, just because you have a sunk cost doesn't mean necessarily that you want to continue investing in something that doesn't make any sense. So based on the scenario, let's look at the scenario here. Let's go to baseline. What the baseline scenario usually is unlimited money. It says I can do everything. Now, when I have it in baseline mode, if I aggregate this is 100% of strategic priority. There's a strategic value of 100. Everything's selected. You'll notice it's non-linear because some of these are more valuable than others. I mean, here's the prioritization. Knee and elbow pads is worth 12.56%, but the value delivered by software benching is very small at 1.76. So I mean, the challenge here is that a lot of companies, they say, well, I don't necessarily have that kind of money to do this, right? So what you'd want to do here is you can say, okay, let's see what we can do with different amounts of cash here. So if I go, let's drop it down to like 7 million or 6 million. That's a scenario that I might want to define for this. If I do 6 million, what that does here is it says, okay, for 6 million, these are the projects I should do. These are the ones I shouldn't do. So this really does, and the thing is, again, it's not linear. So you're dropping it by a third from a dollar perspective, but the value is only by 20%. You can do a force in, force out. This is really useful too, because I mean, a lot of times from a executive perspective, I'm sure you've all been there in the scenario where, somebody says this has to happen. And what this can tell you is, okay, you want to force something in, something else has got to come out as a result of it. So we're actually lowering the strategic value from like 80 to 76. But this is going to kick out, currency translator is going to get kicked out, and tax checker will be kicked in. So you've got the ability to do that. And the thing you can do here is once you've got a scenario that you like, you can save it and give it a number. So the thing is, it gives you the opportunity here to save a series of scenarios. And I mean, these are the ones I use for demo, but you can build as many as you want and do comparisons about, what's the mix I think that makes the most sense for the organization. And then whatever comes out of this can be the scenario called final. Which represents the portfolio scenario that we've got, and then that's the new baseline. There's a really cool thing called a compare report, which allows you to look at, based on the different scenarios that I've got, what projects are selected, here's the strategic value, here's the cost associated with it, and then you've got the heat map here that can be used too, so this can be useful as well. So this is pretty cool from a cost perspective. And then, the other aspect of this is when you get to the resourcing side of this, right? Then the other tower, this is where do I have the people? And these are separate calculations. So there's a degree of art here to use these capabilities within the tool. And what this does is it says, okay, baseline 1 is the one I saved. It's based on the current resource. What this tells you is based on the current resource mix and a common start date. What can I do? Now, there's a couple things you can do here. You can add people, right? That's a possibility, or I can change dates. So those are the two calculations, two things I can do. So if I want to add additional resources, for example, suppose I want to add here. Let's go in here. High resource is 5. I can recalculate it. So by hiring 5 resources, this is what happens there. But I'm going to drop this back down to 0 like I was before. I can recalculate. And the thing is, when I was at 5, I can save the scenario too. So it gives me the opportunity to, create a scenario based on the hiring of resources. That's one way you can impact ability to deliver resources. The other way to do this is by dates. So for example, I mean, everything here is on 12/5. Suppose I say, I'm going to move this one out to November. I'll move this one out to December. And then I'm going to recalculate. Now, since you've got that impacts your weighting over time, guess what? Now I can do them. So it moves them into the portfolio. So really at no additional cost, This allows you to bring additional people in. So the things you can influence here is hire people, or you can go ahead and move things around. And again, there's an element of, like I was saying, an element of art here that needs to be applied. Other thing to look at from best practices is the requirements details. And this is something that's really cool from an organizational change management perspective, because you want to understand if things are not being selected. You want to really understand your resource mix in terms of your organization. So what I'm curious about here is really, where do I have deficiencies? And these are the not selected. Tells me for these months I was short resources. And the thing you'll notice here, for example, this was not picked because in December I'm short testers and trainers, right? And then I've got some situations here where I'm short testers and trainers again, and the strategic value is lower, so that impacts it. But the thing that this does, it can tell you from an organizational perspective, do you have holes in your resource mix? So best practice here is to look at this and say, if usually the constraint organizations have is like high knowledge resources, like business analysts, BAs, people who've been around for 20 years who understand the technology and understand the process. So understanding those pain points it can really help you in terms of the overall efficiency and output of the organization. So that's the whole prioritization side of this, and you'll see, they got the resource, the cost, and they're kind of separate. And I like to have the portfolio management from resourcing work very closely with HR and the resource management group team. Last thing I want to show is reporting. Power BI, best practice, definitely do this. The thing is cool about Power BI, a lot of different things you can do here with Power BI. First of all, it's integrated with Microsoft Teams. So if you're using Teams with Office 365, you can use it to, segment your reports. So I've got QPM demo project online reports. And what you'll see is you got reports and dashboards that are segmented here. The reason this is important is because as we were saying before, reports have a single source that provides data into the report itself. Dashboards are a mashup, and I can construct these very much to support that can align very well with my view. So if I've got one here that's called QPM program, I built a PBI dashboard that aligns with the 4 transformation project types, the one we talked about: back office, corporate functions, master plan, omnichannel. So I can build out a dashboard here that allows me to, start at the highest level. If you look at the report, it starts at summary, then goes to status, then tasks, then risks, then issues, then program, and it decomposes as we go that way. But the thing you want to do is, from a reporting perspective, it gives you that highest level dashboard, and then you can say, you construct it so that the pain points are strikingly obvious. So if I look at there and it says, okay, project health, these are good, this one's okay, oh boy, I got a problem here. And then you can double click on it and dip deep down and dive into the specific information associated with it. And if you go use drill through, which is the way from best practice perspective, you want to look at project status on this one. What's the project status on that one project? Example 3, omnichannel, project status, here are the traffic lights associated with it. These are the tasks. These are some of the ones that are giving me problems here from a schedule perspective. So this immediately gives you the opportunity to diagnose what the issues are. And it doesn't require a project manager to spend days and hours doing this. As long as people are updating their project plans, all this information is available. So it starts at the bottom and flows up. This is just a fantastic tool from the ability to, here's the issues, here are the risks, everything's in one nice fell swoop here. And from a usage perspective, it's always good to go back to the beginning here. Oops. Sorry. You go back to the summary and it can give you this initial view. So I mean, the PBI side of this is pretty important. And if you look at it also from a dashboards perspective, if I were to look at executive dashboard, the other way to think of it is you can look at it as an alternative to views in some cases. So for example, resource management, we built one for resources. I've got individual people by week, traffic lights on availability, and a lot of times you want to you can use Power BI to do that, and the reason you'd want to do that is because it's all in one spot, and it can also be aggregated with other groups. Dashboards, again, data brought from lots of different sources. So if I go to executive dashboards, this is all pulled from a lot of different sources. Again, I've got project health, so I can go, oh, that one's a problem. Boom, it'll take me down to the detailed project status that's causing me the problems. So this really can be tailored to the audience that you're looking at and be very specific there. Microsoft has, standard content packs that come with the tool. So for example, if I like Project Online dashboard, this is a Microsoft dashboard that they're constantly updating. Um, I'm not a big fan of it. I find it cluttered. But if there's resource availability, resource assignment at work, like any of the others, you can click on it, takes you from the dashboard down to the report pretty easily. And then if you use things like drill down capabilities, I mean you can go infinite. This is as far as you can go, but it'll show me for Molly Dempsey, for example. I understand what project she's doing, what her tasks are. I can go all the way down to what the task level on that person, the lowest level of detail. So it's very, very beneficial from that perspective. The other thing to think about for Power BI is that, the other applications besides Microsoft apps have content packs. I just downloaded these yesterday. I mean, for incidents, we did one for ServiceNow. For example, ServiceNow has a content pack. So if I were to click on their thing, these are their incidents. So we have a ServiceNow incident we're using. If I were to look at their incidents, I can go there. So again, it brings data from a lot of different places, lots of different applications into one place. That was all I wanted to cover today for the best art of the possible from a best practice perspective. There's a lot of material I went through. I can't implore you enough. Each one of these subjects, just resource management, portfolio, each one of those is a topic of it itself for like hours at a time. So please reach out to myself or Lori to talk about, to schedule some time, and we'll be happy to walk through it with you. Thank you very much, and have a nice day. Bye-bye.